Hello, and welcome back to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Mayer, and we are set today to supercharge your day with another dynamic episode. Before we dive into today's excitement, don't forget to connect with our electrifying community at themanufacturingculturepodcast.com and catch all of our content on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Tap in today as we continue to navigate the high voltage theme of the month, software that's driving cultural change, where we spotlight the masterminds behind the software that revolutionizes our manufacturing landscape. Joining us in the hot seat is the co-founder and CEO of Transmission, a maestro of manufacturing communication, Jeff Fiala. With an integrated software platform that includes everything from eye-catching digital signage to intuitive employee kiosks, Jeff is at the forefront of evolving how manufacturing facilities operate, safer, compliant, and exceedingly productive. Jeff is no stranger to the entrepreneurial marathon, having paced from early-stage startups to helming enterprises with sky-high revenues. He's played every position in the field of business, from sales, marketing, HR, finance, and operations to even product and engineering, consistently scoring with his cross-functional finesse. His expertise has powered through B2C marketplaces, e-commerce, ads, and SaaS with vigor that propels companies forward. Factory TV is at the heart of Jeff's vision with Transmission, a platform that's changing the internal communication game in manufacturing. Jeff and his team are cultivating a community on the production floor by delivering compelling content that informs and engages. And let's not overlook the brilliance of their check-in kiosk, which has reinvented how information flows within the industrial ecosystem. Gear up today, folks, for a conversation that will energize and inspire as we introduce a tech titan redefining factory communication and driving change one digital interaction at a time. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome the trailblazer himself, Jeff Fiala. Get ready to tune into an episode that's programmed to innovate. Hello, Jeff. Welcome to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Jim. I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for taking the time. When you and I connected, I want to say it's been 6 or 7 months ago at this point. Your product, your mission, what you're here to do in this space absolutely bowled me right over. It's a wonderful thing that you're aiming to do with your product here. Before we dive into Transmission and Factory TV and all those things, we want to hear your story, Jeff. Tell us how you've got to where you are now.
Thanks. Well, yeah, it's definitely meandering. I think I'm kind of, I might be a little bit of the prototypical entrepreneur in that it's a meandering journey that goes in a lot of different places.
Yeah.
I actually, coming out of school, I started on Wall Street and I worked as a trader trading equity stocks for more than a decade. And it was really, it's funny. My wife is an entrepreneur as well. And it was when we first started dating a little over 10 years ago that I really started to get the bug.
Okay.
I was like a fly on the wall for a lot of what she was doing. And it was so much more interesting than my job. So I think it was partially just jealousy. I was like, this seems like a cool thing to be doing. And in that classic, like, you don't know what it's like to be in the driver's seat until you are.
Sure.
I picked that fight and here I am. Yeah, I've worked at a couple of different, I got started with consulting, kind of using my finance background to help folks on the numbers side. And then it increasingly moved into operational roles. And then I went in-house at a startup. And I've basically been working in the software and technology space since then. I've done it for a handful of different businesses, as you mentioned in the intro, from like very small, just getting started to, publicly traded. So I've been fortunate that I've gotten a lot of different exposure, and I've also kind of gotten to learn what I do well. One of the things that's funny when you get into early stage startup stuff is that you have to do everything.
Sure.
There's nothing that's off the table. There's nothing that's not your job. And so you kind of get proficient at a lot of stuff, and then you quickly identify some things where you're like, I'm really not good at that job. I'll need help there.
Well,
So
that's an important part of anybody's leadership journey, right? Is
yeah.
understanding your what skill sets you bring to the table. But I think it's just even more glaringly obvious in that startup world. Am I off base in that?
No, no, absolutely. I mean, it's funny, running a podcast that's about culture, because I think culture is something that we talk a lot about, and culture is such a different animal at the size of a business. The larger the business is, the more that you carry the kind of inertia of what you have been doing, and it
Yeah,
becomes much more difficult to change, which is a good thing if it's good, and a really bad thing if it's bad.
yeah,
But a single individual can impact the culture of a small business, and so we see that a lot, we talk about that constantly. I think for us, we talk about our company values a lot, probably more than you'll see most anywhere else, because I think it guides so much of what we're doing.
yeah,
And so it's like it's the lens through which we look at our work. And it's an
yep,
important thing that also kind of keeps us, I think, engaged and excited about our work, is that like we think it matters.
yeah.
And so, I think one of the things that I had been looking for throughout my career, and this is a place where I really feel like I found it, is work that feels important, and not just that like, oh, hopefully we'll build a great business out of this, or hopefully customers will like our product, but even more that there's like a story behind it that's important, that transcends just the businesses involved.
Absolutely. And so, how did uh, the idea of transmission come about? I mean, through that journey that you took us on, and working then from finance and consulting and operations and going in house, how did the this idea for transmission come about, and say, "Gosh, I've got something here."
So it's transmission is actually, we're just, gosh, in a week here we hit our formal announcement of like the launch of our transmission company. But the products that make up transmission were at previous companies that we acquired. And so there's essentially two kind of foundational products that we started with, and then we started merging it into a single platform, and then we've been stacking things on top of it to try to kind of execute against our vision. So the two pieces are the digital signage, what was once called break room TV, that was at a company called Iconic. And that's really just, the TV is like, again, very, very deliberate with our naming conventions, because we know our customers. Break room TV was just for break room TV entertainment, right?
Right.
And so it was like just a communication tool that was used pretty exclusively there. And then the other product was Lobby Fox, which was called the check-in kiosk. Also pretty self-evident, right?
Right.
And so we already started with a bit of a manufacturing footprint, in that we had, our very first customer was in Bowling Green, our HQ town. And they had really approached us saying, we have a little bit of a challenge. Can you help us with something?
Okay.
And so it's expanded from there. And I think that what we kind of looked at was like some of the things that, one, the check-in system did well. Some of the things that what we now call factory TV did well were really, really complementary. And it was kind of a shame that they didn't talk to each other.
Sure.
And then we started to kind of think more broadly, and like, so much of what we do is about communication, and as you mentioned, and then we just started to kind of step back and think about manufacturing communication. But if I'm honest, the thing that got me the most excited about this business was when I was first learning about how the check-in system had been implemented in manufacturing facilities. I was like, what is the starting point for this product? Here we are putting in like, digital touch screens, inside of lobbies and vestibules. Like, what were they previously doing? And they're like, well, sometimes it's a receptionist, but a lot of times it's a logbook.
Yeah.
It's a clipboard.
Yeah.
And
Paper.
I was like, you get a piece of information like that, and you're like, wow, there's a better way to do that.
Yeah.
And so it was like, if they're running that process like this, and you have like, you can imagine like in a manufacturing environment where somebody could get injured, and the liability and the risk is through the roof.
Yeah.
And then the process is just like, can you sign in on the clipboard? It's like, well, I think there's an opportunity here for us to do this better.
Absolutely.
And so that was really the auspices under which it was like, well, let's learn more about everything that goes on, and then let's see what else needs to be automated and digitized. And so it kind of was through this lens of like, this is a very people operations focused activity. There's a visitor coming into the manufacturing facility. What other kind of people operations focused things can we help?
Awesome. So let's dive a little bit deeper into communication in the factory environment, in the shop environment. Jeff, for those of you not uh, watching on YouTube, Jeff drinks this green drink out of a Pyrex like measuring cup, and it makes me happy every time I see it. So everybody, shout out to Jeff and his green drink in the Pyrex. Let's talk about the evolving nature of communication on the factory floor. How, how has communication really failed over the years, and how can we see it start to evolve in the future?
Ah, boy, what's interesting about this dynamic is that there are so many different things that are impacting it. From the kind of cultural changes around the kind of the generational workforce and what the expectations are of how people were meant to work or how they would talk to their boss or
Yeah,
how they were supposed to behave at work, to obviously the manufacturing environment where safety is paramount. And then when an output is very clear, like in a manufacturing environment, then also productivity is something that is very keenly measured, right?
sure.
So there's so many different things that are driving this. And so then as you've seen this kind of evolve over time, I think that we are in this very interesting inflection point where I have conversations with customers constantly that are about skill sets and how that's impacting how they work. My co-founder is actually going to some lunch in a week or two that is about workforce innovation, and he's being asked to talk a little bit about our view to it. And one of the things that we say a lot in this is rather than knowing what we want to teach the workforce, it's more of like, what tools and systems are we using so that we can teach the
Oh,
workforce,
sure.
and so I think one of the things that we're seeing on a constant basis through so many of our partners is that there are skill sets that are potentially at risk for just walking right out the door.
Yeah.
And so when you have some of these folks, especially some of the baby boomers who are maybe towards the tail end of their careers, well, that's the guy who knows how to operate this machine. And like,
Absolutely.
we don't know how we're gonna maintenance it. And some of the maintenance that we do on it doesn't happen even on a yearly basis. And so when this guy leaves, we don't know what we're gonna do. And
It's that
so
tribal knowledge that's locked and not necessarily captured by next generations, right?
exactly. So we see these like kind of two far ends of the spectrum. The one is this like you say, that legacy knowledge that is like institutional stuff that this person knows how this thing works, and we all lean on this person.
Yeah.
And then we see the flip side of it of like constantly evolving things that are happening inside of facilities. We have a lot of our customers who are like, if you are producing like small custom goods, like it's changing all the time what you're doing based on the contracts that are coming in, and then how you assemble them, how you're packaging them, that's changing all the time too. And so like, how am I constantly talking to a large workforce that deals with a lot of employee turnover and get them up to speed on, today we're doing this and tomorrow we're doing that, and it's always different, right?
Yeah.
And it becomes like a real challenge for anybody that's in sort of a management role to be
Sure.
like, how am I going to manage this workforce and make sure that we don't have to pack a box and then open it right back up and unpack it because somebody didn't learn how we're doing this today,
Absolutely. So how does that communication uh, help drive data driven decisions in the manufacturing world? I mean, you and I both know that this manufacturing industry is so data driven in decisions we make, from what capital equipment we buy, how we hire people, how we fire people. How does this real-time communication solution affect those data-driven decisions?
It's funny because I think that a lot of times, and I've seen this in several different industries, a lot of times the reliance on data in one place can be kind of a striking contrast to like a complete absence of data in another place.
Sure.
And
Okay.
so, like you say, these like, these capital expenses, these massive investments that these businesses make where they're bringing in 7-figure, 8-figure machines to do, that are completely going to change how you work
Yeah.
and have these dramatic impacts. And then the actual like day to day, like one of the things that we talked about, our check-in system started off as like, okay, well, we need to have people be able to watch a video or to sign a form so that they can watch a safety video and sign an NDA, right? I
Yep.
want to give them a quiz to make sure that they know these are the shop floor rules. And we kind of took that and we repurposed it into the employee kiosk that we are now moving increasingly into our facilities. And a lot of folks are like wholeheartedly adopting it because what they're seeing is like, oh, we had a near miss. And so then we talked about it in our weekly safety meeting, right? But I talked about it and that was kind of it.
Yeah.
And like, okay, well, are you playing that near miss on the TV? Do you have a verification that everybody saw the near miss form or that they watched the video? Did you distribute a quiz? Did everybody pass the quiz?
Yeah.
Right? Like, and so a lot of it is like putting systems and processes in place so that you can say like, rather than just saying like, check the box of I've done this, like, did anybody get left behind on that?
Sure.
And so that's what we're trying to do is help implement that process so that it can become second nature. So that it's like when EHS wants to talk about some specific safety incident, that you can look through your employee roster and say, did everybody sign off and they understood what this was and why it happened and how we avoid it the next time?
So is Transmission's platform able to connect with ERP systems or HR systems, so that you do have that record, or are you creating a platform where they can then go in and say, leadership can go in and say, hey, I just saw that you haven't done this, and send somebody a pinged email or a message personalized to them? How does that work?
It's funny. It's you really teed this up in a way that you could not have expected. So, yeah. So essentially, we started off with saying like, let's help kind of digitize some of this exact type of work. We're actually launching a product that our tech team is working on right now. That is the like, how do I take all of what we're calling these like workflows
Yeah.
and make it so that not only can I distribute them and can I verify that a single individual has done them, can I automate the reminder process and the notification process of like who hasn't done it or who's taken a quiz and they failed it or all of that
Awesome.
information so that I know and I can immediately identify that like, one of our shifts didn't actually go through this training. How did we miss that? Or,
Wow.
somebody missed work that day and they didn't cover this information.
Wow.
So we're trying to build those fail safes so that I can really look through my roster, because the big piece here is then not only do I get to kind of move my entire workforce lockstep and say, I know that everybody has done this and we're ready for the next thing, but also I can start to identify the patterns. And I think that
Absolutely.
that's going to be a big impact too, is like, what are the things that we consistently struggle
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, because you know, well, I think the stats, only about 97% of employees in manufacturing have smart devices, or have cell phones in general. Only about 83% have a smart device, right? So if
with?
you're providing this signage, I can't tell you how many times I go in to a facility and people have no idea that I'm coming in that day, right? How
Hmm.
cool would it be for these companies to be able to say, hey, Jim Mayer from either the Manufacturing Culture Podcast, if I'm there for a podcast, or Jim Mayer from TCO Strategies is going to be on site today doing a cultural assessment. And that way everybody is on the same page. It's not something that people have to answer a text or look for
Hmm.
that paper sign that's up on the wall. Those visitors coming in, I mean, I see your screen behind you. You could have just along the bottom, Mayor will be here today, or Jeff
Hmm.
Fiala will be here today, right? Is that kind of the idea, to get everybody on that same page?
Yeah, a lot of our customers, have done survey work at some point into their employee base, and one of the things that comes up almost uniformly is people want more communication. And so we know that the communication is lacking. And I think that particularly as this industry starts to reassess, like, how do we go about attracting the talent that we need to be able to do what we want to do? I think increasingly the empowerment of the employees becomes an important thing. And how do you do that? Well, you got to get them in the loop on what's going on, right?
Yeah,
So it's
absolutely.
like, I think this is when we talk about that like generational mind shift change in how you manage a workforce. I think one of the real opportunities that's being created right now is the opportunity for management to say, rather than treating what's kind of been treated like the rank and file as somebody who I just tell what to do and then I measure the output, why don't I give them a little bit more information and see, since they have a unique perspective on what's going on, if they can identify anything that is a problem waiting to happen or an opportunity that we can immediately improve upon.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And regardless of generation, whether it's the baby boomer generation and they were watching, My Three Sons as kids, and then, Friends and Cheers and all those shows on network TV, or the younger generation that watches YouTube and shorts and has everybody's used to having that TV. It's not like a smart device where it that is more generation centric, right?
Mhm.
And so you're providing this platform that spans generations.
So that dynamic is something that is always top of mind. We talk about the how we want people to interact with the system constantly. There's what you mentioned here also goes like it's handled differently depending on the facility, because we have a whole bunch of customers who have no cell phones allowed inside of their facility. And so between those dynamics where you say like, 4 and 5 have smartphones, but 1 and 5 doesn't. And that if you have 20% of your employees who can't interact with something, well, that's going to be a problem, right?
Yeah,
And then you have a lot of folks who are saying no phones on the production floor, no phones anywhere outside of the locker room, no floor, like rules like that. Well, then it becomes like, I'm going to need to be able to interact with this system in a lot of different ways.
yeah,
So our system is mobile friendly, but we know that there's no expectation that that's going to be the preferred route, because I think a lot of folks, particularly, on a production floor, are saying, hey, listen, I don't know what they're looking at on their phone. So you
yeah,
can tell me that they're pulling up the tutorial video on how to change the blade on this machine, but they could just as easily be on YouTube,
right.
right? And so now we're saying, okay, well then let's think about what we put on our TVs. Let's think about the resources that we make available in these employee kiosks, so
Yeah,
that we know that we're giving them everything they need to do their job, everything they need to communicate with us, but then also we're not compromising safety or productivity in the process.
absolutely. I love that. With some of the advances into this industry 4.0, and I've seen a lot more, maybe not in the precision manufacturing world, but other manufacturing verticals having tablets at each station. That's a space that transmission is in, and provide that workstation by workstation almost designed content.
Yes, exactly. So we really think of it in kind of in a couple of different ways. So the first is the TV is like a push tool to just say like, I have a bunch of things I want to say to you, I want to put in front of you on a regular basis.
Sure,
So whether it's things like what we call our dashboards, so that I can put my KPI, my scorecards, whatever our goals are, right? I can put that in front of it, and that's front and center on the TVs, and it's customized. Like, these TVs in the production area have this information, the warehouse has this information, shipping and receiving has this information, and oh, by the way, like the one that's over my shoulder, it's playing safety bingo in the break room, right?
sure,
So like I have all these different versions of information. And then what about the content itself, like the videos? Well, again, like it can be, we had a customer who was having an issue with how pallets were having like zip ties affixed to them. Right. So we created a video and put the video in the warehouse. And now every time that they were looking at that video, they were seeing like there's a right way and a wrong way. And here's the side by side. And we were able to
sure.
correct the behavior on the fly that would have been way more difficult to do if you had to have a person over everybody's shoulder all day long for a month trying to make that change.
It makes leaders almost more effective out on the shop floor because they don't have to go station to station reminding people don't put zip ties on pallets. They can do their job in helping guide the employees through their life cycle versus task management, right?
Exactly. And it's an amplification tool is really what it is. Like we're trying to give, leadership real leverage to do their job better. And then vice versa, the kiosk is really an opportunity for that two-way communication where I can say, I have an inventory request and I know that I can kind of like hotkey it so that that's immediately going to who needs to have that information. Or if I have a call for help, it's immediately going to who needs to get that information. But also, if I want to pull up a specific video of how to do something, I can come and do that as well. And I can see like, how do I perform my job right in front of me?
Wow.
So
that's awesome.
I think what we're seeing is kind of the realization of like, there is a computer-sized gap for this workforce.
Yeah.
And so while we think about it in the obvious ways for our work, I spend a lot of time in front of a computer, right? So like, obviously, whether you are using it to, write code or to build models or to, send emails or whatever you do that's computer focused work, well, you also get all of the additional tangential benefits of having a computer in front of you for all the communication needs and all the resources and all that.
Absolutely.
When you strip that out of that workforce, well, now suddenly, I think the traditional view was great. There's no distractions. But I think now the more like kind of modern view to it is, oh, we actually have robbed them of a lot of resources they need to do their job.
I want to go back to something you said a couple of minutes ago. You were talking about, companies doing surveys, and you and I both know that there's a huge connection between engagement levels and productivity levels, right? So how can companies in the manufacturing space better link together those engagement metrics with those productivity metrics and make them more visible? I mean, and actionable in their floor. Is that a solution like transmission?
Yeah, so we've seen, it's funny. We had a customer who in their on their TVs, they had one of these like widgets, we call it, one of the sections of the TV was actually the stock ticker for their company. And they thought they had made a great decision because they were like, oh, this will be so great. People can see, the stock ticker and they'll know exactly how the company is doing. And it was met with really vehement disdain. And the reason why is because they had really dropped the ball on communication around profit sharing.
Oh.
And so the employees are basically looking at this and saying, I'm just being reminded how much my hard work is making somebody else money.
Yeah.
And they didn't realize that, like, no, as this stock goes, so does your compensation, right? So I think there's a huge alignment opportunity that's created there. And then, yeah, I mean, I think just generally speaking, like engagement is such a critical component to it because, attitude really is everything. I saw a great quote recently that I keep resharing with our team that is like, it's something to the effect of, don't underestimate the impact that a positive attitude can have on your work and how much more powerful a good attitude is versus a good skill set in a lot of cases. And so one of the things that that we're always talking about with our customers is like, okay, you've got this TV, right? I think that, everybody looks at that TV through the vantage point of, how does it relate to the work that I have to do? How's it going to make my life easier, right?
Yeah.
So EHS kind of programmatically is thinking about like, what are all the safety things I want to say? HR is thinking about what are all the HR things I want to say? One of the things that we're always pushing on is like, well, let's think about it holistically. But, what is the relationship that we're trying to build with our employee base? And so how do we infuse more culture into this? One of our ready-to-use videos that like we have a big content library that's got like hundreds of templates and videos that they can put right into their TV. And one of the videos that we have in there, actually, I think there's a couple versions of this now, is basically like about how valuable it is to have a friend at work.
Love that.
Engagement is a really multifaceted challenge. And in this environment, even more so, because there is a lot of employee turnover. And so what we see in a lot of our facilities is that there's kind of like, the veterans who have been there for a long time. They know each other. And a lot of them won't even really interact with the new people because they think of it as a revolving door. And
Sure.
maybe after you've been here for 6 months or a year, maybe it'll be time to learn your name. But in the meantime, I don't know if you'll be here tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. Now, on the flip side is like, that has huge downstream impact for how those people feel when they get there. Because if they're not welcomed in, well, then they're a little less likely to come tomorrow,
Yep.
right? So like, it's either a vicious cycle or a virtuous cycle, depending on how you manage it. So we talk about things like, how do I use my TV programming to like, let's spotlight employees. Let's introduce the new people. Let's
Yeah.
if you do something as simple as saying like, this is Jim. This is, it's Jim's first day. Jim's going to be working here. Oh, and FYI, Jim's got, a wife, 2 kids, and a golden retriever. Well, guess what? Somebody else in that facility is going to come up and say, I got a golden retriever. Right. And it's the little things like that that actually make big changes into how somebody feels about their job, you know? So
Yeah.
I think what we end up doing is spending a lot of time reiterating with our customers that like, it's the little things that have dramatic impacts. And so if you can, focus on the cultural stuff, we have a lot of our customers are in places where like high school football is a real big deal where they're at. Right.
Yep.
And so then it's like, hey, why don't you put something up about what happened in Friday night's football game or Saturday's football game so that people can just see it because it's a conversation starter and they're talking about it. Right?
Absolutely.
So,
Well, and I see it as a place of talking about those small incremental wins, right? Talking literally about small wins within the facility, giving people the ability to say, hey, so and so did a great job today, right? It's that virtual pat on the back, but it's then out there in front of everybody. Does your platform give people that opportunity if they're utilizing the kiosk? How would an employee go about saying, hey, I want to recognize Jeff for his job well done on the smelting line last Friday. He really got me out of a bind. Is there a way for employees to do that one-on or peer-to-peer?
That's a great idea. We don't currently have a functionality like that, but I'm legitimately going to get off this call and talk with my team about that. We do a lot of this kind of like highlighting work from the kind of like who's owning the digital signage level. So
Sure.
it's a lot of management stuff, and we definitely do encourage a lot of just like, you got to celebrate those wins, right? People are looking for something to keep them going, and it's unbelievable how one good day, one great interaction can go a long way in towards making people feel differently about their work. But I think that peer-to-peer thing, it's funny that you mentioned peer-to-peer, because the other thing that we talk about a lot is gamification and like, how are we going to get people to lean in and have a vested interest and stuff? And so whether it's through things like the safety bingo or the quizzes or whatever, like how do we make it so that they're, I know that we are aligning our incentives because I want you to show me that you understand this, but also there's something good for you if you do it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that's been really great in this, with this company is that we get to be a fly on the wall for a culture kind of view into a lot of different facilities. Yeah. And it really does run the gamut. And there are places where you can tell from the moment you step on site that people take a lot of pride in their work, that people are proactively looking around, that they are thinking that if I call out some behavior that I think is dangerous, it is not me, ratting somebody out or being a tattletale or trying to kiss up to management or whatever. It is for your safety. It's because I care. It's because I think it's important. And also maybe because I appreciate that if we have to shut things down for any length of time, that's going to be a real problem, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
And there's the other end of the spectrum too. And I think that when you see the other end of the spectrum, you realize like, we've talked to folks who have turnover rates that are north of 50%. I mean, I won't, the global behemoth, I won't name names, has got a near 100% turnover rate in their warehouses, right? That's a culture thing.
100%.
And if you're doing that, the bottom line is that maybe somebody in the finance department looked at the model and said, it's okay because if we get X amount of productivity and we can replace them, then the math works. But the
Yep.
bottom line is that they're starting to realize that at some point, the reputation and the amount of the labor force that you burn through has made it so that you cannot hire people.
Yeah.
And it's expensive. Hiring is
Absolutely.
expensive. Training and onboarding is expensive. Employee turnover is expensive. So,
Yeah.
like, if you can get people to come into your facility and kind of seamlessly hit the ground running, and they make friends and they learn how to do their job, people appreciate when they're learning new skills. People
Yep.
appreciate when they're productive. People appreciate when they are, like you said, acknowledged for their good work, right? And rewarded for it. So
Yep.
if you can do all of those things, it's a lot easier to add to your team. And then you don't have to spend as much time trying to fix the hole in the boat because,
Absolutely.
you know, so like
Absolutely.
there's a lot of people that are just, it's a bucket and they're shoveling they're scooping the water out rather than fixing them.
Absolutely. So, last question that I have for you, other than, so two questions. You know, feedback loops are such an important part in continuous improvement. And I don't know any manufacturers out there that aren't striving to continually be better and going through CI projects to become better, become more efficient, whether that's on the people side or the product or process side. How does this kind of software help with that feedback loop, right? So we see, and you've talked about how this is a great tool for the employers to give information to the staff. Is there a mechanism for the employees to then give feedback to the organization itself?
Yeah. So in this, in the way that that we've built out our kiosks, we're essentially trying to give you, a lot of different things that I can accomplish through the employee portal, right? And so we're always trying to say, like, how are we capturing more information? And one of those is really just kind of that open space, kind of like almost survey type format of saying, like, what are you seeing? Like, is there, and allowing
Yeah,
somebody to just make recommendations on stuff. And
that's awesome.
honestly, I think that one of the big things that really has a dramatic impact is when somebody sees success in front of them, whether it's them or somebody else that is like in a similar position, right?
Yeah,
So when a business changes the way that they do a process by way of an observation from a very junior person, boy, does that really have a huge impact on how everybody feels about it, you know?
absolutely.
And
Yeah,
so, yes, absolutely. I mean, you can't get too far away. If you're working on the production line, what we always say, and we say this to our employees as well, is like, everybody's got a unique view to what's going on, right?
yeah,
If I'm in the weeds on what's going on in that production line, I see things a little bit differently. I'm staring at this set of problems.
yeah.
That gives me a unique perspective that I can potentially offer out some suggestions. So then how do I go about building a culture of, having people feel like, A, I should do that. It will be, welcomed and also acknowledged and rewarded. So yes, I mean,
And acted upon, right? I mean,
exactly.
that's you've got to build that culture, and that's part of that initial stages of that. People aren't going to take the time to fill out a survey or provide feedback if they just feel like nothing's going to happen when they do, right? So you got to build that culture, and your clients, your customers have to have that kind of mindset going into it, I would imagine.
It's so funny. One of our employees who was working on break room TV before it became factory TV helped a manufacturer that wanted to run a large employee survey, and the results of that survey where communication is bad, which, like I said, is pretty much kind of the default, and also management is bad.
Mm.
And you know what the response to the survey was? No more surveys.
Oh
So
man, that's painful.
I'm sorry. Can you hear? I don't know if someone's calling me on the other line here. But that's exactly that's exactly the kind of stuff that we're trying to avoid here, right? Is like,
Yeah,
the I don't like what you have to say, so I don't want you to talk anymore. Rather
yeah.
than like actually kind of face the music and say, like, is this something that we can learn from, and is there changes to be made?
I I'm working with a new client. Quick little side story. that has historically done engagement surveys. This is on the consulting side, doing a new engagement survey. But part of my process is I go in and I talk to their staff about their experiences with surveys in the past, just to break through any roadblocks that we may see. And the perception from the employees out on the floor is we never wanted to be honest in these surveys because we knew that if we were, the management team was going to be fired. Not the top level leadership team, but top level leadership would then fire all the middle managers if we were honest about how we felt middle management was operating. And that's a tough place to be in, right? You want to be able to make changes based on the feedback, but you don't want the changes to be made is that knee jerk of just firing people. And so it's great that you guys are giving this platform, this ability for people to truly give feedback to the organization. As we wrap up here, what haven't I asked you? I always like to ask my guests, what haven't I asked you that you want to share with the audience today?
So I mean, I just to pan back and kind of have like you were kind of leading me there anyways, but one of the macro kind of things that's been on our mind a lot is just like the future of manufacturing in America. And I
Yeah,
think that increasingly, I think COVID has been a real wake up call that I hope we will heed the warning of, which is that our reliance on external production for virtually everything that we're doing is
yeah,
really a really dangerous game to play. And so then, as we see, this kind of um, uh, global unrest and supply chain disruption, and how fragile this entire ecosystem is, I think more than ever, it's time for us to have a real conversation around what manufacturing in America needs to be going forward. I think it's a tragedy that we are not the leaders in this space that we once were. And you'll
yeah,
hear from a lot of CEOs of major producers around why they're offshoring, and certainly the costs are not an insignificant piece of it. But that's a problem that we need to solve. But what's really scary is the skill set gaps.
yeah,
And so
absolutely.
I think this is something that like I'm continually bringing up in conversation. I'm encouraging our team to, because I think that as we look at what the future of this country and manufacturing's role in it needs to be, I think
Yeah,
we want to build a very, very robust manufacturing base with adaptive skill sets so that we can be more self-reliant. And I think it's a critical part of the, safety and autonomy of this country going forward. So,
absolutely.
without getting too high up on my soapbox here, I'd say like that is the thing that I am most interested to hear what people think about going forward, because I know that between the private equity roll ups of manufacturing and the offshoring that's happened, I talked to a lot of folks who 20 years ago, and the executive role in this industry was just figuring out where in China were you going to start doing this and stop doing it here.
Absolutely.
And I really am excited to see that people are increasingly realizing that we have to invest in our workforce, we have to invest in our capabilities so that we can produce it.
And I'm starting to see a lot more, not a lot more. I maybe a rebirth is a better way to put it, Jeff, of those small shops, right? Those mom and pop shops. For a couple decades, we saw those private equity firms, those venture capital firms buying up those small shops and then just churning and burning through them, right? Using them for spare parts, essentially, and then offshoring production after they got processes down pat, etc. I'm starting to see. I was in Spokane. I want to say last fall, and the amount of one, two, three, four-person shops that have a couple of machines, they know how to program, they're doing, and they're going out and getting jobs and becoming part of the larger manufacturer's supply chain is very heartwarming to me, because that's where this middle class that came post War II came from, was those small mom and pop shops, those skilled tradespeople that were able to create something, and they built that middle class that we knew and loved from
Mhm.
the early 50s to 2000. And it is a shame. It's a matter of national security, national interest for us to rebuild that part of our economy all over again.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well said.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, any other parting thoughts, or how'd you feel this interview went? Are you happy?
Yeah, this is fun. This is fun. I love talking shop. So I relish the opportunity to talk with our customers about what's going on. And for somebody like you who's also kind of gets to do that bird's eye view and drop into places and see the contrasting pieces, it's nice. I mean, just like we were talking about with the knowledge sharing, right? Like it's a crucial piece of it. And one of the things that we're always talking with our customers about is, please listen to what we're saying. We have the benefit of being in lots and lots of manufacturing facilities, and I can tell you a
Yeah,
little bit about what's going to work and not work rather than you just trying it in a vacuum. So,
absolutely. Where can people find you?
so our website, www.sendtransmission.com. You can find us similarly on all of the socials. Obviously, we're always happy to chat with anybody who wants to talk manufacturing. And just like your product idea earlier, we're always open to ideas. So, love to hear from folks.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you being on today. It was a great conversation. So that wraps up another high octane chat with Mr. Jeff Fiala, who's been instrumental in showcasing the vital role in communication or of communication in the manufacturing industry through transmission. We didn't touch too much on transmission itself. We talked about the issues, though, that transmission solves. And I love that conversation we had today. We really unpacked some of those pivotal issues, and we've seen how innovative software can drive that cultural metamorphosis on the production line. Sure, you keep the energy up and check out more of our episodes on the manufacturingculturepodcast.com website. And because we're all about building connections, you can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Join us there for ongoing conversations and introductions of people like Jeff. If today's episode sparked your enthusiasm, I need you to pass that spark on. Share this episode with friends, peers, family members, your grandma, one who's just as excited about the intersection of technology, manufacturing, and culture because they all relate so well together. Please take a quick moment to rate and review the show before you go on whatever platform you're watching or listening to this on. Your feedback is a fuel that I really need to continue crafting content that resonates with you. I only want to provide you content that you enjoy and that you enjoy consuming. Keep tuning in, folks, and let's all be part of something that energizes the manufacturing space. Until next time on the Manufacturing Culture Podcast, keep your circuits engaged and your ideas flowing. Stay vibrant, stay ready to innovate. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.